You endanger everybody by not being a team player.
What about the other sniper team?
The highway patrol?
No, the one on the fire department.
Yeah, that's the highway patrol snipers. Yeah, they kind of melted down below the wall and disappeared when I made a phone call. Really, really interesting stuff. So that leads us, so we had a great time. Understand, before Thursday night, the highway patrol was coming by. Hey, how are you guys doing? We're so glad to have you here. We need more bodies here. Because the National Guard wasn't there. Okay? And they're, St. Louis County was coming by. Hey, how are you guys doing? Are you guys well armed? Let us know if you see anything. We'll keep you up to date if anything weird goes down. You know, it was very professional communication among professional people trying to do a decent job keeping everyone safe. That was till Thursday night. And when we busted their team, I want you to know, at 5 o'clock in the morning on Thursday when I was driving back home to get a couple hours sleep, I got a phone call from Chief Jackson, Tom Jackson. I don't know how I got my cell phone number, but you know those policemen, they can look stuff up. He calls my cell phone. He goes, is this Sam? And I said, yeah. He says, this is Tom Jackson. I said, hi, Tom, I remember you. He goes, you do? I said, yeah, you were in an SBA training class back when you were with St. Louis County. That's right. I do know you. And I said, yeah. He said, well, thank you for coming to Ferguson. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you bringing the quality of men up there that you brought. But I called you to tell you something. The Department of Justice came in our planning meeting today, our briefing meeting, and said, we're not going to worry about the protesters tonight. We've got a right-wing radical group called the Oath Keepers operating in our area. This is your government at work, right? Of course, Nixon wouldn't guard these people. Belmer didn't have enough backbone to stand up to Nixon when he told Belmer he wasn't going to guard the people in his county. Now, if Belmer had been an elected county sheriff, things would have been totally different. St. Charles just made a huge mistake by getting rid of an elected sheriff. Because now you have a politically appointed chief, a politician running the police department. You do not have someone who's accountable to the people. The whole point of government is to protect life, liberty, and property. If you're not doing that as a police officer, you kind of miss the point. Okay? A lot of police officers get that. Board-appointed politicians with stars, they don't get that. Elected sheriffs, they get it. So the best thing you can do in your community is to lobby, is to get the law to change so that St. Louis County has an elected chief rather than a board-appointed police chief, an elected sheriff. We have got to go back to that. It is the one thing that you can do to protect your children, your grandchildren, your property, and everything that's been important to you in your life. Get the politicians out of law enforcement and get to someone who's accountable for doing the job. And everything changes for the better. Okay? Now, so we went from, hey, how are you guys doing? You know, do you need anything? Are you well armed? Oh yeah, we're good, don't worry. We went from that to Friday night, they show up, get the F off the roof, we're taking your guns, we're arresting you guys. That was Friday night. Now, what do you think a Marine would say when a law enforcement officer approaches a building that he's standing guard on and says, get the F off the roof, I'm taking your gun? What do you think a man who's active in the Marine Corps, who's been over there defending our Bill of Rights, would say to an officer in that situation?
You didn't have a chance to say anything, the guy be laid flat out.
Well, lucky the guy's on the roof and the other guy's on the ground, so they were separated. But I'll tell you what happened. My Marines reached in their pocket and said, oh, you need to see my ID? Can you read it from there? It sounds funny, but it's not funny.
No.
Because now you have an armed conflict. You have sheepdog on sheepdog. That is not a good thing for this country. And by the grace of God, 50 county officers weren't killed in that parking lot that night. Because if they had drawn their weapons or grabbed one of our guys, those special operations guys with suppressed machine guns would have killed those kids with badges in the parking lot. Because they're out in the open with no cover and all they were handguns on their side. There are 50 of them out in the open. And my guys are behind cover in the trees. They didn't even know where half my guys were. And they wanted to start an armed conflict. And I was like, hey, whoa, get your people back. Get them in the parking lot. This thing's not going to go the way you think it is. Nobody's giving up their guns. Can we go to that picture that you have of that one county officer? I got a $1,000 reward for a guy who recognizes this person and gives me his name. Not that guy.
No.
Next one up, 20. This guy right here. That's me talking to a sergeant and Lieutenant Hoots. And this guy right here, before this conversation ensued, came up to me and said, "We're taking your guns, boy." That's a direct quote. And I looked at him and I said, "Listen, if by some miracle you ever took a gun of mine, I have a federal license to make guns, I would make another one and come find you. So don't talk smack." And then I looked at the sergeant and said, "Get this idiot out of here before he starts something you can't fix." And he looked at his guy and said, "Shut up." Okay. The sergeant understood. But the young guy, chirped him like a parakeet. Now, let's go to the slides again. Okay. So, let's go back. Go back to this. Next slide. Okay, right there. So here's some of the facts that I wrote down so they wouldn't be construed or exaggerated a couple days after this event. Okay? And the protesters who hated us the first 2 nights, they were calling us the effing police, they were calling us the effing KKK. By Wednesday night, we're driving by and honking and saying, "We love you guys. Please don't leave us." They were stopping by our buildings and saying, "Do you have more men to guard our buildings, our houses, our apartments?" By Thursday. Okay, so Tuesday and Wednesday night, it was get out of our town. And by Thursday, it was, "We love you guys, please stay." The opposite with the police that were there. The police were very friendly to us the first 3 nights, and then Thursday night happened, and then Friday night they ordered us to leave. Now here's the interesting thing about the media. You know that to have a story come out on Saturday morning in the Post-Dispatch at 4 a.m., you've got to have your story in before 11 o'clock, right? To make it to the paper. You're a media guy. Is that normal, about a 6-hour delay? It's just right in that area. Well, what's interesting is Saturday morning at 4 a.m., there was a story. Do you have a picture of that? Let's find that slide. There was a story in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch saying that St. Louis County kicks the Oath Keepers out of Ferguson. They didn't even show up at our building to ask us to leave until 1:20 a.m. Saturday morning. And we never left, which I find absolutely fascinating. Find it or not? No, it's not there. Keep going. Go up. Keep going.
Yeah, it's not here. I think it's on my laptop.
Okay. Okay. So let's go to the video with the. Do you have it on the thumb drive? You get thumb drive in here? Okay. Let's go to the video. Do you have channel 5? Oh yeah, that one right there. Oath Keepers Never Left. Let's go to that. So understand, the media fabricated a story as news that never even happened.
They are volunteers on private property. Police have no authority to order them off of these rooftops. They plan to be in court tomorrow to fight the police order, but in the meantime, as you can see, they are still here. Ivan Ferguson, Casey Nolan, News Channel 5.
That's Saturday night. And so St. Louis County, their spokesperson went to the Post-Dispatch and fabricated a story that was a total lie, probably around 10 or 11 o'clock. And then they show up at Friday night, early Saturday morning at 1:20 and tell us to get off the building and leave. Of course, we don't leave. We tell them, "No, you're on private property. You've got no warrant. You need to leave." That's what we told them. And so we had this 2.5-hour standoff where you got armed guys on the roof looking at officers on the ground. It was a terrible situation. But we never left. And finally, the discussion went on so long that all the protesters had gone. And, I said, "Lieutenant, we're about ready to pack it up. It's going to make your guys happy if we get off the roofs and go home and sleep." "Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be great." I guess they could claim victory then. I don't know. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now we had, just so you know, we had people throwing incendiary devices on the roof of the buildings we were guarding. We had people trying to throw Molotov cocktails through the window, okay, on the ground floor. And my men, with their Nomex gloves, would pick up the incendiary device and drop it in a bucket of water. On the roof, we had fireman, paramedic, special operations, fireman, paramedic, MARSOC Marine, fireman, paramedic, police officer. And we had guys in twos stationed all around these buildings for a couple hundred yards on the rooftops. And that's how we protected those buildings. Not a dollar's worth of damage was done to the buildings that we protected. Not in 2 weeks. And we did it not with helicopters, not with bear vehicles, not with tear gas, not with loudspeakers and threats. We did it with a bucket of water and a fire extinguisher and men distributed, armed, on the roofs. And we had people on the ground. We had at least 2 to 3 guys marching with the crowd with GoPro cameras and radios, and that's how we gathered intel on the crowd, energy level, and that type of thing. And so we knew what the crowd was doing, we knew what the police were doing, and we knew how to react quickly to what was going on. The police can do the same thing. They can do the same types of thing, and they may have, and I know we saw some federal agents go into the crowd dressed as protesters. We picked them out pretty easy. But the local police can do the same thing. As a matter of fact, St. Louis City did that at the G8 Summit. They had guys mixed in with the protesters before the summit ever kicked off, and by day one of the summit, they had found their stash of bottles, found their gasoline, their wicks, and all the rocks and all the things that the jerks and criminals had pre-staged. So there's a better way to do it than what Nixon drove through the highway patrol through the county. And keep in mind, when Nixon took control away from Chief Belmer and gave it to the highway patrol and told everybody to stand down and not arrest, he opened Pandora's box and emboldened all the criminals. So Nixon really wears the blame on this deal. You know, now he took orders from DOJ, but you know, we can't even find their emails, so I don't know how we would make that case. But the bottom line is Nixon's got to own it. He's the chief law enforcement officer in the state of Missouri. The governor is. Okay, let's scroll through this real quick. Okay, go one back. Okay. So, on December 2nd, we got a personal visit from Chief Tom Jack. He thanked us. He was in tears. He said, I can't thank you enough for protecting this area. And, you know, I wish we had more people like you guys to help in these situations. And we told him, you know, we don't think you should resign. Don't let DOJ force you out. He held strong for a while, but they eventually got to him. On the 12th, this was after Saturday, Belmer called my attorney. And some of the things that Chief Belmer told my attorney was, look, I support you guys more than you would know, which I find laughable. But he said, once my attorney read the laws to him, I don't know if you know this, but there's a law in the books, I believe it's 44.101. A police officer cannot take a weapon away from a citizen in a state of emergency. It's a state law. So, pardon me?
Praise God.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, they did that in Katrina, and then the Congress passed a law on a federal emergency, you can't do it, and we have a state law here that prevents that. But St. Louis County was trying to break that law. Lieutenant Hoots wanted to disarm our men and force them not to protect the buildings that they refused to protect. And that's the bottom line. We didn't go there for a redneck vacation. You know, the wind was blowing 30 miles an hour, the wind chill was about 10, and my guy stood on those buildings all night. It wasn't about being on vacation. Try it sometime. Just try it for an hour. Stand on a building with 30-mile-an-hour winds. You'll understand what I'm saying. But we went there to stand in the gap because the people that were responsible for protecting the people of Ferguson didn't do the job. And that's why we were there. Anything above that is an outright lie. Okay, so this is some summary facts on what was spent. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, let's go back to the videos. Okay, we have a problem with grand juries. We have a problem, all these government things that can be addressed that will help these situations. But I want to make a case. Let's go to the Albuquerque video. Remember I told you my premise was that a violent police officer who shouldn't have a badge will shoot a white person just as fast as he'll shoot a black person. And I want you to understand that's the truth. Here's a mental health patient illegally camping. The police know this guy. They've arrested him before. They know he's a mental health patient. See him raise their guns when he turns his back? That's okay. He turned around to lay on the ground uphill, and the guy shot him in the back. That's good, with an AR-15. This guy right here holding this gun right here. Shot that guy in the back, a mental health patient. Now, the guy had 2 knives in his kit. Okay? So I want you to understand the totality of the situation. But he was being arrested for illegally camping. And I would submit to you that if the arrest technique exceeds the maximum penalty allowed by law for the violation that you're being arrested for, maybe your technique's not so good. Generally, illegally camping does not bring the death penalty in the United States of America. It might in certain places, you know, in Central America, if you're on a drug dealer's property, but not in America. Okay? Let's go to the Phone Savant video.
Tonight, on Route 2020, a family's worst nightmare when a SWAT team storms their home.
They raided the wrong house.
Smoke and chaos like this. Their little son, Poo Poo, seriously injured in the blast.
This should never happen. What did my son do to them?
What went so horribly wrong?
He did his job so badly, he nearly killed a child. Have the tactics changed?
Now, we use flashbang grenades for the officer's safety. They generally don't hurt anyone unless you throw it on a couch and burn the house down, or you throw it in a baby's crib and blow the baby's face off, which is what happened in this case. He got burned over 60% of his body. And here's the strange thing. They said that their intel had no idea there were children living in the home. This was in Georgia. Okay? So I'm not saying that the culpability lies with the officer that threw the grenade necessarily. Because if he's given intel that there are no children living in the home, then he's going to develop a certain breaching plan that's valid for his safety so he can go home to his family. Okay? But here's the problem. The kids were on the front lawn playing that day for 4 hours. Now, if you're collecting intel and getting ready to do a drug raid, you need up-to-date intel, not last week's intel. This particular family, their house had burned down in Michigan. They drove to stay with some relatives because they didn't have a place to live. They were sleeping in the garage, and they had the garage door shut and beds laid out and a crib for their youngest baby. And they breached the window of the garage and threw a flashbang in there and landed in the baby's crib and blew his face off. The guy's been through 6 operations. He's still alive. Okay, let's go to the next video. Let's go to the Tamir Rice video.
How did you select what businesses to protect?
I'll get to that in a minute. That's a great question.
Newly released video shows cop shooting of 12-year-old Cleveland boy Tamir Rice.
Remember how we all shared the same set of facts? There's a kid with an airsoft gun underneath the arm.
There was a guy that was a pistol, you know, saw his face, like he pointed at everybody. And where are you at? I'm sitting in the park at West Cudell,
Kid paused.
West Boulevard, by the West Boulevard.
So there's a kid with an airsoft gun underneath the awning in a public park. The woman who lives in the apartment across the street makes a call for service and says there's a man with a gun and he's pointing it at everybody, which could be true, right? We don't know. All right, let's roll it. Keep it going. Watch what happens.
They got the thing. More than then it's about his face, you know, he's scared, you know. How does he look like? Yes, I'm a black hair, is he black or white? It's a gray coat, black sleeves, and gray pants. Is he black or white? I'm sorry, is he black or white?
She doesn't want to answer.
Black.
I'm afraid of being called racist.
Oh, I do not. Okay, what's the I'm getting ready to leave, but you know what, he's right there by the, you know,
Notice this person's not afraid.
He's pulling it in there on his pants. I don't know if it's real or not. Oh, okay, we'll come down. Thank you.
17, radio, word police. 6029.
There it is. There you go. It's over. Stop.
Shot fired.
Okay. This has been my largest criticism of police tactics for almost 30 years. When you get a call for a man with a gun, do not drive up within 50 yards of where the guy is and jump out of your car and skin your pistol. What we teach, proper policing, we teach time, distance, and cover. Allow you to make a proper threat assessment. Okay? This guy did everything wrong. He shot the guy within a second of getting out of his car. He drove up as close to him as he could. They were literally this far away when he shot him. Okay? And he had no cover. He exposed himself and forced a confrontation. So if it's a lethal guy, you get shot. If it's a kid with an airsoft gun, the kid dies. Neither situation is a very good outcome. What he should have done was find a point of cover that he could drive his patrol car that was close to this but not on top of the kid and watch him for 10 seconds or 15 seconds, get out some optics and take little 7-power binoculars, a lot of policemen have, or compact 10 powers, you know, they can get out from 30, 40, 50 yards away from behind cover and figure out what this kid's actually doing, because it was not an active shooter situation. He had not shot at anyone. Okay, let's go to the next video.
Excuse me.
Yes.
It's interesting, your take, because I spoke to a training police officer in the Cleveland area, and his assessment was exactly what you said.
Well, that's what professionals do. Time, distance, and cover. Allow you to make a proper assessment of the situation. Let's go to the Walter Scott shooting. It's not common sense. It's very difficult when you're under stress and you get a call a man with a gun. Your adrenaline is up. 9 shots, 5 hit the guy. He picks the taser up off the ground right here, carries it over and drops it on his body. That makes me so mad to watch that. Okay, this guy there's a warrant out for him for not paying child support. Go ahead and pause. There's a warrant for not paying child support. Now, I think I've ever had a warrant out for not paying child support, but I did get divorced, and my daughter did move in with me, and the prosecuting attorney here in St. Louis County decided that it didn't matter if my daughter lived with me, I still owed child support for all the time that I paid all of her expenses and she lived with me. 3 years. And so they filed a case so that they could take it to the Missouri Supreme Court and make a test case out of it and prosecute a whole bunch more people. Of course, the judge, you're crazy. The girl's living with the father. He doesn't owe the mom child support because she's full-time with the dad. That's what happened once it got to court. But I empathize with a guy who the system says, oh, we issued a warrant on him for not paying child support. Maybe he didn't pay child support because he's a dirtbag and doesn't care about his kid. Maybe he's a father that takes care of his kids and is getting screwed over by a corrupt family court system. And boy, is the one in St. Louis corrupt.
Michigan, too.
We're the home of fathers' rights law firms. And the game is, and my business partner's an attorney, the game is, okay, to give custody to the mom because the dad will come back and continue to try and get custody of their children. If you give custody to the dad, the mother will go away and won't come back and fight more often than not. So there's more money to be made, and the lawyers give the judges kickbacks and things like that. It's terrible. All right, let's wrap it up here. Can we go, do you have the slide with the takeaways? Let's go to that. Okay. Okay, so here's what I want you to take away from tonight. All right? Stop being afraid. Teach others not to fear tyrants. Get young people involved in the liberty movement and teach them to be fearless. Our high schools have not taught our children what the Bill of Rights is and what the Constitution is. And if they haven't done it, we need to do it. Teach them the truth. Okay? And here's the thing. Our founding fathers, when they designed the Constitution, they did not agree on everything. As a matter of fact, they disagreed on most things. But what they could agree on, they codified into the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. And we as Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Independents, we have got to, as a society, get back to the unifying principles of protecting life, people's liberty and rights, and their property. Because I think we can all agree on that. They did back in the day, 250 years ago. We should get back to that. Arguing about abortion at the federal level is ridiculous. Okay? That's not an enumerated power to the federal government. They should have no say in that. But we've got to get back to the unifying principles and let states work out the other things. That's how our system was designed. And the further we get from that, the more problems we have. Okay. Educate yourself about the separation of power concepts in the Constitution. Develop and elect state legislatures that have the courage to check federal power. Let's go to the next slide. You got the Hamilton quote, or have you got that, Andy? Okay. Let's look at the Hamilton quote or the Madison quote. Okay. Government's institute of the common good, protecting property, safety, prosperity, happiness, all these things. Okay. People have the right to institute government and reform or alter or totally change the same when their protection, safety, and prosperity and happiness require it. If you were a small business person in Ferguson right now, would you feel like your protection, safety, prosperity, or happiness might require a change in government? I certainly would. Let's go to the next quote. Is that Madison? This is what's really important. If you take anything away from tonight, take this away. No, I don't. Okay? Besides this security, remember, Madison was kind of, he wasn't necessarily a Jeffersonian. He wanted strong federal. He was a Federalist. But when they accused him of giving the federal government too much power and that power would grow, this was his answer in the state legislature, or in the legislature in 1789. He said, besides this security, there's a great probability that a declaration of federal system would be enforced because the state legislatures will jealously and closely watch the operations of the federal government and be able to resist with more effect. Okay? More effect. Every assumption of power. What we don't know, because we fell asleep in history class, and what our legislators don't know, is our founding fathers expected the state legislatures to check federal power. The whole system was designed for the state legislatures to rein in the federal government. And we see that happening today. Montana has kicked the ATF out of Montana. Okay? Utah's done similar things. Texas.
In Utah, didn't they? They basically...
Well, they threatened to at the NSA location. But my point is that once we understand the key that unlocks our prosperity, and that is to go back and revisit the principles that our founding fathers structured this government to do, we can fix this problem. We don't need to shoot at each other. We don't need sheepdog on sheepdog. We don't need buildings burning down in Ferguson. All we have to do is understand that we have to elect state legislatures that understand that it is their number one responsibility to check federal power. And I guarantee you, less than 2 out of 100 get it. And that's our fault. We elected the wrong people. So if you want to know why we have a problem in this country, look in the mirror. Because we have not elected the right people. People that understand this very thing. This is the most powerful cure for the United States of America and all its ills that you could possibly come up with. Let's go to the last takeaway slide. Okay. Confront evil by legislatively rewarding constitutional policing and criminalizing the violation of civil rights. If you're a policeman that refuses an illegal order, you should be protected, if not rewarded. If you're a policeman that violates someone's civil rights, you should be convicted of a Class C felony. We have got to reward the people that want to police the right way. And we've got to put in jail the people that want to shoot black men in the back or shoot a white mental health patient in the back. Now, the guy that shot the mental health patient in the back, he's being tried for murder. You know why? Because he was caught on a videotape of his sergeant's car on the camera saying, I'm going to shoot that SOB the first chance I get. So now we're not talking about a bad shooting in a policing situation, we're talking about premeditated murder. Okay? Okay. Study and deeply understand the concepts of constitutional nullification. That first thing we talked about that I said was so important, legislative nullification, the thing no politician wants to speak of. Okay? The other type is jury nullification. You can take care of that if you ever get on a jury. Now, understand why it's so important that we get our legislative branch doing their job as far as nullification goes. Because I design weapon systems, my company does, and I've designed weapon systems for robots and for drones and for UAVs, and I'm telling you, this is coming. Okay, we have the technology now, right now, to take control. And the next tyrant in this world will not be a man who has to convince 2% of the male population to prosecute his campaign of fear. The next tyrant is going to be the executive that works for Google that bought a robot company and a drone company and has enough money to build hundreds of thousands of robots and take control. See, for 6,000 years, tyrants had to convince other men to do their bidding. That's all going to change. There's going to be a paradigm shift in the next 3 to 5 years. And the wealthiest people on this earth that are the best at manufacturing drones and UAVs and robots are going to take over if we don't get this liberty thing squared away. Remember, I told you that. It's coming. And it's not just coming for you. Most of us have lived 60% of our life. It's coming for our children and our grandchildren. Okay. And the last thing I can tell you is spend 90% of your efforts electing constitutional sheriffs, political appointed police chiefs will not protect you, cannot protect you, or your rights, as Ferguson clearly demonstrated. Okay? And as Baltimore clearly demonstrated. The politicians will not protect you. You need an elected sheriff who's a lawman who cares about the people in his county. Now, any questions?
Okay, how did you select which businesses to protect?
Okay, so number one thing, when government isn't doing their job, the most important thing to protect is life. I could have gone up there and protected businesses, but I chose not to. I chose buildings that had apartments on the second and third floor where people were living and had businesses underneath. And you notice we had the men on the roof surrounding the apartments where the people were, right? And the goal was to keep those people from being burned out of their homes. Now, of course, the media reported that we went up there to protect businesses. What they didn't tell you was about all the people that were living upstairs above those businesses. And the other thing was I chose a location that was near the police station and the firehouse, and I gave my men 2 orders. No buildings within your site will be set on fire if there are people inside. And there will be no mass casualties of first responders in Ferguson. Now, when you tell Navy SEALs and MARSOC Marines that, they get it. You don't have to tell them twice. You only tell them one time. Okay? Those were the 2 orders I gave them. Now, any other questions?
What scenario would have led to armed response by your men?
A threat to life.
The
only excuse, the only reason, valid moral reason for using lethal force is to protect human life. Anyone who tells you anything else is morally bankrupt or lost and confused. Other hand?
When we talk about state legislatures fighting back against the federal government, are you also referring to like a constitutional amendment to repeal the 17th or a convention of the states?
Well, a convention of the states would be a disaster. Yeah. Ask yourself a question, who's going to run the convention? Have you seen what's going on in some of these delegate conventions where some people don't make it to the building on time and they're stopped in traffic, and there's a lot of dirty dealing going on at conventions? That's not the answer.
And you can't limit it to a topic.
You can.
Everything is open.
No, you can.
No, you
can't.
No,
you can't.
It depends on the rules of order And who's running the convention? Any other questions about Ferguson or violence or?
What do you think is gonna happen this summer up there?
I think what you're going to see is a period of civil unrest that rivals anything we saw in the 60s times 5. Okay, I think that what you're seeing is this violence in the urban communities butting heads with violence in the law enforcement community and a third party, the federal government, coming in to spark. We saw federal agitators. Let me tell you something. The DOJ guys that were in Ferguson were telling the protesters that my men were KKK. We had a situation on Tuesday night where Michael Brown's stepfather challenged one of my Marines on the roof and said, "You're the effing police." He goes, "We're not the police." He says, "You're the effing KKK. Get the F out of my town." And my Filipino Native American Marine pulled his face mask off. It was about 0 degrees with the wind blowing. Pulled his face mask down so the guy could see him. And said, "Really? Do you believe the KKK expanded their membership opportunities? Do I have a chance now?" And we laughed for about 10 minutes because he was the darkest guy on my team next to the African American. And he obviously was not white and obviously would not be allowed into the KKK. And it was just a really funny moment. But that's what the Department of Justice was doing. They were trying to kick off a conflict between my men and the protesters. And we passed out prayers, and we passed out Oath Keeper cards, and we got down on the streets and marched with the protesters and talked to them and got them to get to know us and told them we defend your right to protest, just don't burn down any of these buildings because it won't work out the way you think it will.
Yeah, I was going to say, just a real short answer. Who were some of the outside groups, not from St. Louis, that were active in Ferguson?
Oh, the SPLC, ACLU agitators, who were the guys up in New York? The New Black Panther Party was there. We didn't see them very much because they drove by one time with 4 guys in the car and looked at our men and said, "Out of here."
Okay, I just was looking for a short answer. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, a bunch.
Yeah, okay.
A big mix.
Can you quickly comment on the GoPro camera issue?
Yeah, this is. Pardon me? Oh yeah, there were socialists and communists there. Absolutely, a bunch of them. And it was really interesting where we were because we were between the big parking lot on the east side of South Florissant, north of the Chinese restaurant, and the police station. So all of these agitators from out of state would park in the lot, and we would document their license plates and stuff and take photographs of the vehicles and kind of figure out who was coming from where. About 20 to 25% were from out of state. And they would park there and march down, or they'd sneak down. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to tell you about your government, if you don't know how serious this is. We had guys in the crowd marching with the protesters in urban street clothes, hoodies, the whole bit. And we had GoPro cameras on them right here, hidden. 3 seconds before the police would wade out into the crowd to arrest people, all 3 of our cameras got bedazzled at the same time. And our Air Force JTAC, whose job is to understand how all that type of equipment works, recognized the signal from the jammed cameras and cell phones. And he said, "Oh, I know what this is. This is a Model XXX from Harris Corporation in Florida." And I said, "Give me a little more detail." He said, "Well, there's 2 ways to take over an electronic device. Actually, there's 3. You can use EMP to destroy the device, burn something up in it, and it won't work. Or you can take over the power side, or you can take intelligent control with a signal." That's what they did. They used a device by Harris Corporation to bedazzle the cameras and cell phones of the protesters, and then they would wade into the crowd and arrest people and beat on people. And that's something. And they also used stingrays. They had stingrays in there. We picked up stingray signals and stuff. So understand that the federal government is not only doing this, but they're encouraging local law enforcement to use devices, electronic warfare devices that we use against our overseas enemies to violate your First Amendment rights. How can we have freedom of the press if they're bedazzling the media's cameras? How can we have freedom of the press when citizen journalists, when their phones and GoPro cameras are being blanked out right before the police take action? This is a serious, serious violation. And every time I've said this on the national, I've done 60 interviews with the national news media. Every time I've said this, they've cut it out of my interview.
I told my real estate, I just sold a farm down near the Lake of the Ozarks. If all my doctors weren't here, I'd still be there. They don't bother you down in Miller County.
Not yet.
Yeah. Anyway, so I told my real estate agent to try to find me something across the line from St. Louis County, so I could still be close to my doctors. Someone, I was saying Jefferson or Franklin, because MOBAC is in both places, but some girl told me that Franklin County was rife with crime.
Well, they both have a tremendous amount of crime. But you know, the good news with both those counties is you got Dave Marshak running for sheriff in Jefferson County. He's a good man. And probably one of the most intelligent police officers I've ever worked with. Really good guy. And then in Franklin County, you've got a couple of people running that could be decent constitutional sheriffs. So I think you might do okay in either place. I really do.
Oh, but
Yes.
I have a suggestion. You were talking about teaching children about the Constitution and that.
Yes.
Well, I have a 7.5-year-old great-granddaughter, but about 2 years ago, I started her on this program that Huckabee introduced. CD she did every month about your government. Well, one year at Christmas, they were showing how they couldn't have menorahs, the
freedom of religion
stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Asia sits up, she's like 6.5 years old, and she yells, "Somebody better tell Obama about this."
Well, Obama's not the problem.
Yeah,
the problem is our
she's
Republican
get-
legislature.
But she was made aware that this was happening in the country.
Listen, we're always going to have the communists, the socialists, the poor, the lazy that don't want to work, the tree-hugging wackadoos. Okay, that is the Democrat Party. Okay? That's not going away. What's changed is a 1960s era Democrat is more conservative than a modern-day Republican. The Republican Party used to act as a check and balance on the Democratic Party. Now they're like the AFC and NFC. They're like two conferences in the same league of thieves. Okay, so corporate cronyism and these other issues are big problems. And so understanding that where you have wealth and you don't have mining, farming, or manufacturing, you have corruption. In 2011, Washington, D.C. became the wealthiest city in the United States of America. Please explain to me what Washington, D.C. mines, manufactures, okay, or farms. In that little 10 by 10 square mile area, right? Not a damn... Well, you know, I had a woman correct me, and I had to give her props. She was correct, but she said, they're mining your pocket.
Absolutely.
That's where we're at, folks. Any other questions about Ferguson or the Constitution? By the way, I'll say Chris Ann Hall. If you don't know who she is, look her up. She's amazing. One of the best educators on the Constitution you'll ever find.
How do we get the young people to care?
I was just going to comment, just look around this room here. Before Adam back there walked into this room, I think the youngest person in this room was in their 40s. Most of us a little bit older than that.
You weren't looking at me, were you? I just had a birthday, and I take offense at that.
Well, that's the key. You know, my grandfather, who started 40 different corporations, this guy was a prolific inventor. Big small business guy. Liked to set people up in business and just kind of push them away and say, run, buddy, go make some money. He was really good at that. And what he taught me mining, farming, and manufacturing. You know, those are the keys to long-term wealth. But he taught me about to have an organization or an idea last. You had to have that 60 to 80 crowd, that 40 to 60 crowd, and that 20 to 40-year-old crowd. You had to have almost an equal number of each. And he would hire people in his organizations that were of different age groups for that very reason. Because he said you needed the older people so your organization didn't make fatal mistakes. And you need that middle-aged group for doing the hard work that's complicated. And you need those younger people for their energy and their new ideas to keep that organization alive. And I go around and speak all the time, and I see people 50 years to 80 years old. I just spoke in Iowa at the State House a couple Saturdays ago, and it was all 60 to 80-year-old folks, and I begged them, get your young people involved. Force them to. I know they're raising kids. I know they're just out of college looking for a job. But teach them about liberty. Demand that they do this. Tell them it's all going to go away if you don't start paying attention. Because we're going to have the first technocracy we've ever had. And we're going to have drones and robots ruling humans. It's all the technology's in place to do it. We just don't have the proliferation yet. And if I had my Air Force JTAC here, he could give you some really specific information on how we're using these types of vehicles to shape human behavior and gather intel. And it's frightening. We've got to get this worked out quickly. Or that's what we're going to have, and that's what our grandchildren are going to have.
So if something like this happens again, how can the people prepare, get involved to help?
You can stand a post. You can call the governor or the police. But what we need to do is get our legislators involved so this never happens. Right? That's the cure. But you know, at these confrontations, that's the worst. Our founding fathers structured government for one basic reason. And I don't know if you've ever heard anyone put it this way. But it was so that human beings could resolve their differences through debate rather than through the use of weapons. That is the #1 reason our founding fathers did what they did. Kick the tyrant king out so that we create a structure where we can now settle our differences through debate. And that debate was supposed to take hold in the House of Representatives and the Senate. So the answer is to fix that so that we don't have these armed confrontations. I had 15 police officers, I'm on a roof in Ferguson, threatening me, and I'm holding a suppressed .308 machine gun, threatening me. 15 of those guys I've trained. It makes me sick to my stomach. All one of those sergeants and lieutenants had to do was rush me or grab me, and my whole team would have unloaded on those guys.
So you say that the strategic buildings were taken out. We kind of had the belief too that because our government, federal government, wants a police state, like they're the ones agitating in these places.
That's right. That's their motivation. They want to nationalize the police. What did our founding fathers want to do? They wanted to separate powers because power corrupts humans, and they knew it.
And put us against each other.
Anything that violates the separation of powers concept is a bad direction to go. Even if it's painful in the short run, you got to not go there. Because when you see consolidation of power, that's when you see the hammer of tyranny comes down on people. And I can talk Stalin and Khrushchev, 30 million, Hitler, 9 million, Mao Zedong, 80 million. Okay, this is what happens historically. Study your history. When tyranny shows up, millions die. Millions. And so it's really, really important to support a system that includes our founding fathers' concept of separating powers. A federalized police force would be a disaster and one of the last steps to total tyranny in the United States of America. Don't let them do it. Do whatever it takes to prevent that. Because that'll be the final nail in the coffin, and they will have control.
Can I ask another? How do we find out where you're speaking? It's just by chance that I found out, and my husband wasn't able to give me.
Well, I speak when I'm invited to speak. And I apologize for my dress. I came straight from work, and we're getting ready to run a security operation a long way from here. And I got a team of 2 platoons of guys that are flying out tomorrow, and it's a mess. Everybody's trying to get weapons, ammo, gear, everything on a plane and get out of here. So I normally don't speak in this rough estate.
I'm not worried about that. I would just really like to hear you speak again, have my husband be able to hear you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sure we can get a hold of you and let you know.
I want to thank you. This is the second time I've heard him. I just can't get enough of this. I don't know why, but with everything that's going on today, this man is a wealth of knowledge. Second of all, I want to thank you all for coming. You are the ones who care. Now what we need to do is you go out and you call 5 people.
Including Jamie Allman.
Yeah. And you say, I heard this man tonight. And then you say, If you guys want to hear this again, I will arrange it. We can do bigger and better, but you call 5 people and then you get those 5 people to call somebody else and continue. The only way we're going to fight this stuff if we become involved and educated, okay? But I want to thank you. Adam, thank you for coming. You're the youth. We can help you. You are our future and my grandchildren's future.
Now I'm really worried.
Yeah, I know.
No.
I'm not.
No, I'm not either. But we are in bad shape here. Look at what's going on in Baltimore, New York. I've been told that Sharpton is coming in the middle of May to Ferguson to stir everything up again. This is going to be, my question is, if it wasn't for Michael Brown, how would they have started all of this?
They would have started in another city.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
there are a lot better places to have race riots
yeah.
than Ferguson. That guy did it right. I kept thinking, why are these people here? Why don't they go to Cleveland? You know.
But I want to thank you and good night. And you can talk to me.